You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, what you say, and what you think. Marcus Aurelius wrote that line to himself, in a war camp, not as a threat, as an instrument setting. Memento Mori, two words that get mistaken almost every time for despair. The phrase has an actual origin, and it isn't a monk in a cave. It's a Roman triumph, the single loudest moment of public praise the empire could stage. A general rides through the streets in a gilded chariot, the crowd roaring his name, and standing just behind him is a slave with one job: to lean in over the noise and say it plainly, "Look behind you. Remember you are only a man." Not to humiliate him, to keep him from believing at his highest moment a lie about what he was. That whisper is where this whole practice starts, not with fear of death, but with a correction against forgetting you're alive, ordinary, and running out of time like everyone else. This film is about what the Stoics built out of that one whispered sentence. Tell a modern audience to remember death, and most people hear something close to a horror movie. A warning, a curse, a memento in the very worst sense of the word, something to flinch away from rather than look at directly. Tell a Stoic the exact same phrase, and they hear something else entirely. A tool being handed to them, not a threat being made. The difference comes down to a distinction the Stoics were careful about. One modern usage tends to flatten. Fearing death and simply being aware of it are not the same mental act at all. Fear is a verdict you hand down about the future, an opinion dressed up as a certainty. And like any opinion, it can be examined, argued with, and corrected, which is exactly what Stoic training does to it. Awareness is something much plainer, an accurate fact sitting in view. Your time is finite, so what you do with the parts still in front of you actually matters today, not eventually. The Romans didn't reserve this only for generals riding through the streets in triumph. They staged the same idea at something as ordinary as a dinner party. In Petronius's account of Trimalchio's feast, a small skeletal figure, an articulated silver skeleton, is set on the table in the middle of the meal, not to end the party, but deliberately to season it. The line that goes with the gesture, more or less, translates as, "We'll all end up like this, so pour the wine, and actually be present for the part of the evening you still have." The object was never really the point of the custom. The attention it managed to buy back, mid-meal, from people who'd stopped noticing they were even there, that was. Seneca opens his very first letter to Lucilius with a complaint that still lands 2,000 years later. While we are postponing, he writes, life speeds by. Not life is short, that's the popular misreading. Life speeds by specifically while you wait for a better, more convenient time to actually start paying attention to it. You are dying daily is the line most people quote out of that letter, and it was never meant as a slogan. It's closer to a ledger entry, plain and unsentimental. Every day that passes in Seneca's accounting is a day permanently subtracted from the total, not banked anywhere for later, not refunded, not owed back to you under any circumstance. Seneca's actual advice was almost accountant-like in its practicality. Sit down, he says, and audit exactly where a given day really went, hour by hour, without flattering yourself about it. He didn't just theorize this. He named the specific thieves in the letter, the patron who eats your morning with a summons, the crowd that eats your afternoon, the grief that eats a week you'll never get refunded. Most of a life, he argued, is stolen this way in small pieces nobody notices going, or wasted on things that plainly never deserved the time, or simply never tracked at all spent, but unaccounted for. Seneca wrote to Lucilius as a man watching his own hourglass, not lecturing from outside one. The letter reads less like a sermon and more like one friend warning another before it's too late to fix the habit. The letter's real target was never death itself. It was the comfortable illusion everyone carries, that there's an infinite line of credit still open on tomorrow, renewable forever, no balance ever actually due. Marcus Aurelius had a favorite image for the passage of time, and it wasn't a clock face or a calendar. It was a river. Ever-flowing was his word for it, a current carrying every single moment past you before you can even close your hand around it. From that one image, he drew a strange, genuinely useful instruction. Treat each day as though you had already died, and everything from here is bonus time, owed to no one and nobody's debt to repay. He paired it with a second thought just as sharp, from a different passage. Even a life stretched out to 3,000 years only ever hands you one single moment to actually live in, the present one, always just this one. A long life and a short one, he reasoned, lose the exact same thing at the instant of death. Whatever moment happened to be currently unfolding, no more and no less than that, which is Marcus's entire case against ever envying someone else's longer lifespan. He wasn't composing this from a quiet garden somewhere, with time to spare and nothing real at stake, the way a philosopher in a painting might. These particular notes came out of an army camp, during a war fought on two fronts at once, in the middle of a plague that was actively killing people a few tents away from where he was riding. The river refrain wasn't a tidy philosophy exercise for him to admire. It was load-bearing, something he actually needed, that specific week, to hold the day together at all. The river doesn't pause for anyone, emperor or otherwise, and Marcus didn't treat that fact as a tragedy to mourn. He treated it as the entire reason today, this one, counted for something. Seneca has a second argument, far less quoted than the first, and it cuts in almost the opposite direction. It is not that we have a short time to live, he wrote in on the shortness of life, but that we waste a great deal of it. Life, in his account, is long enough for absolutely anyone who actually spends it well. The constant complaint that there's never enough time is usually a confession about spending, not a fact about the clock. His target in the essay was a very specific type, the perpetually busy man, always in visible motion, running from meeting to obligation to appointment, mistaking the motion itself for a life actually being lived, and mistaking exhaustion for evidence of a life well spent. Seneca even reaches for the most powerful man in the entire Roman world as his example, the Emperor Augustus, who spent his own letters, late in life, openly longing for the retirement he never once got to take. Total power, in other words, bought Augustus nothing against this particular problem. Set against him, Seneca places someone with far less to show for it on paper, no armies, no provinces, who somehow still owns every single one of their days outright, without dispute. The difference was never the raw number of years available to either man. It was whether anyone was actually home, paying attention, while those years passed. Memento Mori, done properly, isn't a countdown meant to make you feel worse. It's an audit that hands the remaining balance of your life back to you on purpose so you can finally spend it. Here is the practice stripped all the way down to something you can actually use today, not just quote at a dinner party. Take one completely ordinary thing, a shared meal, a walk you've taken 100 times before without noticing it, an unremarkable conversation with someone you love, and do it once deliberately, as if it were the last time you'd ever get to. This isn't superstition, and it isn't asking you to believe anything false about how likely that actually is. It's an attention trick, nothing more mystical than that. Repetition is what quietly drains the weight out of ordinary moments. By the 10th time you've done something, you're often barely present for it at all, running on autopilot. Marcus's instruction was to let the plain awareness of an ending determine what you do and say and think. This is that instruction, physically applied, not merely read and nodded along to. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, pushed his own students towards something almost identical in daily form. He had them treat routine hardships, a cold bath, a plain meal, an uncomfortable conversation, as small deliberate rehearsals, not as things to simply endure and immediately forget. The point in both cases was never the discomfort or the artificial finality for its own sake. It was training attention to actually show up, on command, instead of drifting. That shift, repeated daily until it's boring, is the entire technology hiding behind the phrase. Marcus Aurelius wrote most of what survives today as the Meditations during the Antonine Plague and the Marcomannic Wars, not in some quiet retirement afterward. Death for him was never an abstraction to reason about calmly from a safe distance. It was outside the tent, some nights closer than that. He didn't write these private notes to escape that fact, the way a modern reader might reach for a screen or a distraction instead. He wrote them using the fact directly, as raw material, turning the plague outside his tent into the actual argument on the page in front of him. Mortality became the lens he checked nearly every irritation against before letting it land, a colleague's petness, a delayed report, a foul mood he could feel building, all of it held up against the one fact that actually mattered. Most of it, by his own account, simply didn't survive the check once he ran it. Around him, meanwhile, court life carried on exactly the way court life always does, plague or no plague, people jockeying for status, comfort, and proximity to power. In the middle of a crisis that was actively making all three of those things meaningless within weeks, sometimes days. His private notebook, scratched out by lamplight in the same camp, at the same time, under the exact same risk as everyone else there, was quietly doing the opposite work. The man with by far the most to lose, an empire, an army, a family line, used the exact same tool that's still available, for free, to anyone holding a pen at the end of a hard day, plague or no plague, empire or none. Back to the chariot then, one last time, and the whisper riding behind it the whole way through the roaring city, over the noise, over the applause. Remember, you are only a man. Not a threat, never a threat, a correction. Delivered at exactly the one moment a person standing that close to absolute power is most likely to forget it. Seneca's ledger, running underneath everything else in this film. You are dying daily, so stop postponing the specific parts of your life that actually matter to you. Marcus's river, carrying the same argument from a different angle. Today is the only payment that will ever actually clear, the only one that was ever really yours to spend. And the practice underneath both of them, plain enough to use tonight. Treat the ordinary thing directly in front of you as if it were the last time, because for something, eventually, without any warning, it genuinely will be. None of this, from the whisper to the letters to the private notebook, was ever really a way to think about death more than you already do. It was always, from the very start, a way to finally pay proper attention to the one day you're already standing in, which, whisper or no whisper, was always going to be the only day that was ever actually yours.